Good evening, everyone. April 2nd, 2022. Should be a lucky day for an episode. Going to see how my voice holds up after my stomach procedure the other day. Time for episode 43, taking up where we left off. Backing up about a paragraph on page 358 with a fencing battle, duel between David Carradine and Sir Francis Drake. Okay. Drake's fencing skills were flawless. Wielding a heavy cutlass in his right hand, he held a fencing cloak in his left. Sweat bathed his prominent brow. His face was lean and determined looking, with a straight nose, inquisitive eyes, a well-trimmed short beard, and a mustache of brown. A black bandana secured his hair. His clothes were of fine cloth, with the tunic vertically striped in broad bands of red, gold, and black, and a baggy-sleeved shirt in the style of the kingdom of Highwall. His pants were well tailored and tucked inside of tall black boots. He was the spitting image of a noble naval officer. Observing his enemy, he quickly surmised that their styles of fighting were similar and their training equal. He began their duel, straight thrust, overhead slash, parry, stab, and riposte. His feet, waist, and body balanced, in perfect harmony with the roll of the dying ships, and at one with his blade. And Highwall is the name of King James Redpool's kingdom, the Firmish kingdom of Highwall, including Etzel and the surrounding lands. And riposte, it means a counterstroke, a retaliatory maneuver to make a riposte. Carradine worked hard to match his aggressiveness. In an instant, he had adopted Drake's own rhythm and speed. Fighters on all sides of them began to fall, one by one, in a near-even exchange of death. At times, other combatants drew near, interrupting their duel and forcing them to face new foes, but always they returned to engage each other. Times, bitter agony crawled along and then flew like a falcon. All around them, the harbor battle intensified as they fought, until only the last 10 men from each crew still stood. Now each fight was one-on-one, and their captains dueled without opposition. Sir Francis fenced with effortless fluidity, his sword arm serpent-like and deceptive. Carradine was the older man, his style softer and more economical, hoping to find an end to the seemingly limitless endurance of Drake. Their skirmish grew bolder, with each fighter receiving numerous small cuts to their arms and legs. Carradine realized that if they continued dueling, then they both would eventually die of blood loss, leaving no victor. Sir Francis parried back in order to gain distance. "You fight well, Captain," he affirmed in the Draconian tongue. "I would have the honor of knowing your name." "I am Jack Carradine, son of John and Admiral, brother of Bruce, Keith, Christopher, and Robert, and captain of Draco Bellum for 3 decades. "Well met, Captain," Drake affirmed. "I am Sir Francis Drake, captain of the Golden Hind." "Then we shall sink together, for my ship is ablaze, and this is her death knell." "It is regrettable," Drake declared, "for you have been a fine opponent. Shall we continue?" "Perhaps there is another way to end this," Carradine suggested. "The gladiator approaches, and you will soon be outnumbered." And the footnote on the page is notes from my late Aikido Shihan, Paul Sylvain of Valley Aikido in Northampton, Massachusetts. He once told me a story about the old duels of master samurai, in which the combatants would receive numerous small cuts to their forearms, resulting in increasing blood loss. The warrior who succumbed to weakness last would determine the victor. I have no idea if this story is true, but as a student hungry for knowledge of foreign cultures, I never forgot it or my revered sensei. Okay. "Aye," Drake said knowingly, looking out past the port quarter. But so too does the adventure galley, and her guns will destroy you. I agree, Carradine replied with a nod, but the Gladiator is closer, and our ships will sink together at any moment. I can promise you and your crew safe passage. We will release you all free and alive as soon as it is possible, without jeopardizing the safety of our own. My knights will lose honor in surrendering. It need not be so, Carradine expressed. Smoke will soon cloak the entire harbor. Then we can release you in a longboat if you wish, and from there you may rejoin your fleet and fight on. Either that, or we can finish our duel and die together. The choice is yours. Sir Francis looked around them. The visibility was limited, but it did seem that the Gladiator was closer, and only the top decks and masts of their ships were then above water. "Hold!" he commanded. "Hold!" Carradine echoed, and so disciplined were the remaining sailors that no blow fell after those orders were issued. The ship shook as Gladiator pressed alongside just forward of the port beam. Her archers were waiting at full draw, their targets chosen. "Hold your fire!" Carradine shouted with his arms raised. The Gladiator was Captain Richard Thurston's ship, my girlfriend's father. He was a courageous young sailor with wavy brown hair who seemed to ignore the chaos of danger surrounding him. Thurston quickly discerned the situation. "Archers, engage the approaching ship," he commanded. "Open the gangway and extend the plank. Get everyone aboard, and be quick about it." Working together, help was rendered, and all the living and wounded were soon brought aboard. Arrows from the adventure galley began striking sailors on the deck, and a titanic explosion erupted from out of its gun ports that tore great holes in the Gladiator's rigging from whatever flew from it. Captain Thurston had never seen such weapons. "Helmsman," he ordered, "turn into the wind. Steer us towards the open sea." Hilltop batteries narrowly missed them, but struck Draco Bellum's decks yet again, fully engulfing the ship, masts and rigging in flames. Burning furiously, the ship remained defiant until the last, refusing with her last breath to sink beneath the waves. Thurston's emotions were great, as he was a compassionate man, and he cried for all those who were lost. "Captain Thurston," Carradine declared, "these vermin are under our protection. See to their care, for they are not prisoners." "Very well, Commodore," he replied, "but may I ask what we are to do with them?" I leave that to their Captain Drake. He is a worthy opponent." "Will you take command then, Commodore?" "The ship is yours, Richard. I will advise you as I can." "Aye, sir," Thurston said. "We'll need speed if we are to survive. Orion, fill the sails with wind. That should surprise them." The ship's mage was a Lyosalfar of considerable skill. Invoking his power, he crushed a handful of peas in his hand and hurled them into the air, the result of which was a phantom wind that filled the wounded sails and allowed the ship to leap forward. Seconds later, the titanic report of cannons emanated from the adventure galley, and iron balls and chain shot splashed into the sea just behind them. "Other Marines are sure to need our help," Carradine stated with concern. "I'll keep a wary eye out looking for them." "Archers and artillery," Thurston commanded. "Fire at will." Ships burned and sank all around them. Both Draco Infernus and Exultans had been destroyed by battlement projectiles, and no survivors floated in the waters where they went down. Countless small Firmish vessels had also sunk, but as yet the Hind was their only active warship to fall. And the footnote is Draco Infernus and Draco Exultans both refer to individual dragon ships of the 11th Fleet. Draco is a constellation in the far northern hemisphere. Its name is Latin for dragon. Here it refers to a certain type of Dragonian warship, originally constructed with only a single mast, and then, in later models, fitted with 3 masts with square-rigged sails, in imitation of the superior sailing vessels of the Far East. Infernus is Latin for lower, or of the underworld, and exultans meaning jubilant, so that the above names represent the vessels Underworld Dragon and Jubilant Dragon, respectively. Okay, but sadly they sink. Okay. Great pools of oil and incendiary naphtha burned uncontrollably throughout the harbor, and these had claimed the lives of untold sailors on both sides. Draco Splendidus and Augustus were both embroiled in battle with 2 large frigate-class ships, one of them flying a single white star in a blue field for colors. But Captain Thurston was unfamiliar with either ship or her captain. Their ship-to-ship battles continued in a strange, admirable futility that would likely claim the lives of them all. "Should we engage, Commodore?" "Steady," Carradine replied. "Keep an eye on the water for survivors, Richard. The 11th isn't through yet." Terribilis appeared off the port bow. Aclon had successfully navigated his way clear of the Firmish warship and was turning laboriously. 2 other Dragonian raiders, the Jester and Draco Gladius, were attempting to engage the battlement defenders themselves with magic and missile fire, and they appeared, fighting off their port bow. Redpool's trap was closing in all around them, but there was still one thing that Etzel could never have prepared themselves for. And the footnotes are Draco Splendidus, or Magnificent Dragon, Splendidus meaning bright, shining, splendid, magnificent, etc., Draco Augustus, or Majestic Dragon, and Draco Gladius, or the Saber, or Sword Dragon. Battle of the Wood. 2,000 Firmish knights afoot and 100 cavalrymen had formed a skirmish line over a half of a mile long that completely encompassed the dense wood where the marine raiders of the 11th had retreated. Their leaders were gallant, able, and well-trained, and High Priest Lys Windless was among them. Battle-scarred, powerful, and wise, his prayers emboldened their troops and helped to protect them from the fell sorcery of the Doc Alfar. The fighting within the forest was nothing short of brutal savagery, and they carried wounded men back by the dozens. The god of thunder was often silent, but on this night his power rumbled distantly from the eastern sea. Windless was tough, and Crom Cruach, his god of the sun and the storm, respected no weakness in his followers. But the god was merciful to those that honored him in battle or made the proper sacrifices. A knight whose leg was nearly severed by a sword's blade was brought before him mere moments from death. Windless laid his gnarled hands upon him, and his leg magically reattached itself. Shortly thereafter, the soldier stood up alive and well. "It's a miracle," claimed all who saw it. "No miracle," Windless declared. "Crom Cruach. Now honor your god and return to battle." "What are your commands, your reverence?" his captain asked. "See to it that the enemy does not escape through our lines. I have seen a great victory if we can drive them back into the sea. We're gaining ground, but these raiders are tough fighters." "Time is on our side," Windless said with a broken smile. "Their ships can only remain within range of the cliffs for so long. If they stay, they die." "I will see to it, your reverence," the captain proclaimed before advancing into the battle zone. Windless muttered a simple prayer and waited for the next wounded soldier to come to him. The Dragonian Marines suffered heavy losses, but their captains led them well, and they held a compact wedge-shaped formation that flowed through the dense woods in a way that the Firmin could not imitate. "They are pushing us," Izzy cried. "I know," Captain Wayne replied, "but we can't stop them. We can only slow them down." "Let's hope that they didn't find the boats yet." "They're making another rush at us," Top Lancaster warned. "Get ready." The Firmish knights were anything but stealthy, preferring the terror of a savage charge to a hunter's silence. "Izzy," Wayne directed, "fall back with your team and get our boats to the waterline." Viking company on me, Captain Douglas commanded. We're moving out. A total of 12 Marines and top Lancaster then assembled. They were all that remained of a former company of 100 soldiers. Slipping off into the night, the Firmish rush slammed into the formation behind them. Captain Wayne was then a pillar of strength, a magnificent tall man, a quiet man whose ire had risen. Standing with his front line behind raised shields and slashing swords, densely packed trees forced the Firmish knights to attack them on foot, and they broke against their lines like waves crashing over a jetty. And of course, The Quiet Man is an American romantic comedy produced by Technicolor in 1952 and directed by John Ford. It stars John Wayne, Maureen O'Hara, and others, and was based upon The Quiet Man's story by Maurice Walsh that was published in the Saturday Evening Post in 1933. It won Academy Awards for Best Director and Best Cinematography. Wikipedia, The Quiet Man. So that's where I got the inspiration for that little segue. Their training was superior, and his troops dedicated and incapable of surrender, but the Firmen were heavily armored and difficult to kill. A berserk knight rushed toward him. Hacking mightily at his shield, he destroyed it, but Marion's blade had already pierced his heart, expertly thrust as it was through the gap in his armor beneath his left arm. 2 other Firmen leaped over their shieldberg and killed 4 of his Marines before he stopped them. Soldiers were lost, but their lines held. A larger group approached. It was time to break off and run. "Peel back," Wayne cried. "Move out in squads back to the beach, and keep it quiet." Waiting until the last group was ready, he moved out with them. They were almost to the beach when they heard the distant cries of the second wave charging in. It would not take them long to figure out what had happened. "On the double, Marines," he commanded. "We've got about a minute to get our asses in the water." Izzy reached the longboats just as a group of 10 mounted knights reached the northern end of the beach about a quarter of a mile distant. Fireworks exploded in the sky above the beach and over the sea. To the north, he saw many sails working their way south in a long, staggered V-shaped line, resembling an arrowhead. Excuse me. And just offshore, his own ship, the Viking, and Wayne's ship, Draco Viridis, anchored beside it. Angling away from them, closer to the nearest fortress, was Jeremy Beam's ship Triumphant, acting as a decoy in order to draw fire away from their transports. "Top," he said, "take 3 men and start moving the longboats down to the beach. When the knights start their charge, pretend to make a stand." "I always like the way you think, Izzy," he replied. And the footnotes are, shieldbergs were walls of men-at-arms who surrounded their kings during epic battles in order to protect them. It was a tactic used by the High King Brian Boru, grandfather of the O'Briens, during the Battle of Clontarf, in which he defeated a massive army of Danes and opposing Irish forces on the field of Clontarf outside Dublin in the year 1014. But sadly he was himself killed during the final moments of the fight. That's my late great-grandfather. Okay. Draco Viridis, the green dragon, green, fresh, and youthful. Another footnote. Okay. So the Firmish knights, anxious to draw blood, lowered their lances and charged. Their horses were grey Percherons, huge draft horses 17 hands tall with wide, deep chests, more than capable of carrying the weight of armored knights. Brightly colored reds and brilliant yellows and green decorated their liveries, and noble crests adorned their shields. Riding down on their most hated foes in contempt, they sought to crush them beneath an avalanche of 2,000-pound churning hooves. Top and his marines stood fast, launching arrows at them, but heavily armored Firmen protected their front, and their barbs were easily absorbed or deflected. Drawing their swords, the cavalry descended on them. Izzy and his remaining team followed the horsemen by looking down the shafts of their arrows. Killing the knights was unlikely, but the horses were more vulnerable. He considered shooting them unfair and distasteful, but no more so than the knight's own advantage. The earth shook as the chargers galloped forward. Arrows flew, catching 8 of the 10 knights by surprise as their wounded or killed mounts fell beneath them. Most of them fell disastrously hard, but their skilled leader somehow released his lance, leaped from the saddle, rolled, and safely regained his feet. 2 of his comrades, neither struck nor stunned, continued their charge. Drawing a great hand-and-a-half sword, he stood guard as his soldiers attempted to rise. Izzy rushed down on him from his hiding place. Slashing madly with his smaller blades, the knight parried some of his attacks and accepted others. Racing out of the woods and across the beach, his company threw themselves on the fallen knights, dispatching some quickly and engaging others in pitched battle. Lancaster and his squad rushed to avoid the charge, but one of his marines was too slow and fell beneath the point of a lance. Turning back suddenly upon his pursuer, Stephen leaped up and wrestled the Firmish knight down. Falling hard together, they lost their weapons in a tangled mass of bucking war horses in individual combats. Rising to their feet, despite a mutual exchange of blows between themselves, they each sought to regain control of their discarded weaponry. Fighting on, 2 more Marines died before squads of reinforcements began pouring out of the forest. The knights, realizing their disadvantage, sought retreat. Soldiers readied their bows and prepared to dispatch them. "Hold," Izzy commanded. "Let them go. There is no honor in it." The Firmish leader was dumbfounded, unable to fathom their mercy. He trotted off with his knights, anxious to regroup and return to the fight. "Weigh anchor, Marines," Wayne ordered. "Get back to the transports." That's where we'll leave off, partway down page 367, before the video gets too long for YouTube. And we'll pick up next time where we left off, and we'll see if Captain Wayne and his men can escape the beaches of Eitzel. Hope you enjoyed it. Have a great night.